Hello everyone, my name is Ellery, and today I have a very special Advance Wars by Web replay commentary to share with you. This is the oldest known archived match of the legendary King of the Penguins himself, Mr. Go7. Now, if you don't know who Go7 is, he's currently ranked 1650, and he's the second all-time best player on Advance Wars by Web, so you could say he's pretty good at this game. He's also a streamer, and if you're interested in getting better at the game, you should definitely go check out his channel. I'm going to put a link in the description below. He has a lot of knowledge about this game, and by watching his streams you could gain a lot of insight on how to improve your own play. He was kind enough to send me this replay, and he gave me permission to give commentary on it, so I'd like to thank him for that. His opponent is Yvonichou, a player who has not been seen since November of last year, but he's ranked around 1200 right now. And Go7 told me he was ranked around 1100, so I figured both players were probably in the 1100 to 1200 range when this match took place. Yvonichou tends to play Sammy, Kindle, and Lash, and you can see that he did indeed pick Lash in this match. He also played Sonya 2 times in his entire career. You love to see it. Go7 really likes picking Andy, and he picked Andy in this match, so nothing too unusual. One thing I found interesting when I was looking at Go7's statistics is that he had a pretty low percentage of how often he picks Olaf. Now, if you don't play Fog, you might not know this, but Olaf is really good in Fog. You tend to see Olaf picked a lot in Tier 2 matches. His win rate and his play rate are both extremely high, and you see a lot of Olaf mirrors. So if you were the kind of player who always picked the best CO, you would probably have a decently high percentage of how often you play Olaf. Go7 has a very specific playstyle that he likes to stick to, and using Andy as a commanding officer favors this playstyle. Although I did notice this map is called Stolen Secrets, and Andy does have a 53% win rate on this map. So you would think that Andy has a slight edge here. However, what's really interesting is that Lash actually has a 43% win rate on this map. Extremely low. So going into this match, Go7 is the second best player on Advance Wars by Web right now, and he's playing a CO that has a massive advantage. So Go7 has every advantage going into this map. By the way, Sonya actually has a 45% win rate, so her win rate on this map is actually higher than Lash's. Pretty interesting stuff. Now I'd like to talk about the COs. Andy has no day-to-day ability. His normal CO power, Hyper Repair, gives 2 hit points to all of his units, helping them stay in the fight, especially when you're stuck in a brawl. His Hyper Upgrade gives 5 HP, 10 attack, and +1 movement, so this can take your injured units back almost to full health or even to full health. It gives them a boost of offensive ability, and it gives them movement, which is fantastic in Advance Wars to help them get back into the fight quickly. Andy's superpower is extremely good, especially when utilized properly. Lash is a little bit more difficult to use in some ways, but a little more straightforward in others. Her day-to-day power gives her +10 attack per terrain star, so as long as you have good positioning, you can take advantage of her boosted firepower, like you want to attack from a city, you want to attack from a forest. You don't want to attack from shoals and roads, and those are things that you kind of already want to do when you're playing Advance Wars, so using her is pretty straightforward, but you're not always going to get the most benefit from this power because you can't really always choose the perfect positioning. It would be great if you could, but you really can't always. Lash's normal power reduces the movement cost of all terrain to 1, so her infantry could run across rivers and mountains. Her recons can drive as far as they want to, as long as the path isn't blocked. This is situationally useful, but you don't really see it used all that often, although there have been times where I've seen players use it to great effect. Her superpower is pretty strong as well. It doubles the effects of each terrain star, so that offensive boost that you get when you're attacking from cities and forests is increased even further, in addition to the attack boost that you get from your CO power, but most importantly is that you also get double the amount of defense. So it can make your opponents very difficult to dislodge from cities, and even forests become pretty strong because they give you +40 defense, on top of the +10 you get from using your superpower. Speaking of this map, as I was talking about the statistics earlier, I want to talk a little bit about the map. It's called Stolen Secrets, and on this map your weak front is particularly very weak. You have one base on your weak side over here, and it's pretty far away from the action, whereas your opponent has two bases on their strong side, and it's actually close to the action. They can reinforce into this zone very quickly, and it takes you a while to get even just over here. So they're going to be able to push on their strong side very strongly. These corners over here tend to be ignored. Most of the fighting is going to take place in the center, and I'll explain why in a second. But one interesting thing about the corners is that if you do abandon them, the opponent can push in from the strong side pretty quickly, and they can flip these properties if you're not careful, if you're not watching over them, especially because it's in fog. You can't see exactly what your opponent is doing. There's a lot of forests around here. They can definitely go on this little kind of like espionage mission. A single infantry can just run over here and flip one of these cities before you realize what has happened. Now, another interesting thing about this map is the verticality of it. There are a lot of shoals and roads and plains tiles here through the middle, here near your strong side, and then here near this opponent's strong side, cities, plains, shoals, roads, which means you can reinforce vertically across this map. So even though it takes a while to get from your weak side over through here, your strong side can very quickly get in through here. And as a result, a lot of the fighting ends up taking place right here in the center. By the way, when I was looking up information on this map, I was reading the comments by different players, and there were some people who had a lot of things to say about this map. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But there were, I think, mostly positive comments, and personally for me as well, when I looked into this map, I thought it was a pretty interesting one. It looks fun to play. Anyway, I've talked quite a bit so far. I'm going to go ahead and get right into the match. So the first thing Go7 does is he just starts building infantry, and Yvonichou is going to do the same thing. He's going to start building infantry, and he's going to move his units forward. The first divergence in the turn order here is going to come as early as day 3. So I'm going to move forward a little bit until we get to day 3, so we can see how they move their units differently here. Okay, so here's Go7's move on day 3. So he chooses to move his infantry over here. He's going to cross the mountains and try to get into the center as fast as possible. Go7's strategy in this match seemed to be he wanted to push into the center and take control of the center. He's focusing all of his attention on trying to capture the center and hold good positioning. Now Yvonichou, on his move, he moves his infantry across the river, and he's going for this airport here. Now the reason he's doing this is because after he captures this airport, he can immediately capture the city that's right next to it. This is called a chain, because this is within range of the same infantry. So this infantry will capture, and then he's going to capture this city right away. That's better for economy. So if you want to build up your economy, you want to go for captures that allow you to get chains. Whereas Go7, he's foregoing this. And after he gets this comm tower, or if he gets this city, there's nothing else in range. There's nothing else that this infantry can reach, which means he's not going to have anything to chain to. So he's going to be behind around 1,000 gold on income. And that can make a big difference in the early game, because you have to decide, when do you want to build your first vehicle. So you want to get that gold as soon as possible. So he's going to capture his second base, and then Yvonichou has already captured the second base. That's another one of the things, you want to capture your additional base as soon as possible. It's very rare when you get into a circumstance that you don't want to capture that second base, or that additional base, in this case third base, as soon as possible. So Yvonichou is now pushing over the mountains, and the reason is because he already knows that this infantry is going to be able to get this city, and so he doesn't need to send another infantry down here. He can just send this one right over the mountains and start pushing into the center as well. Now Yvonichou is going to build his first tank. It's day 4, so this is a pretty early tank, but he was able to afford it. He didn't need to base skip or anything like that. So this is a map where you can get your first tank out pretty quickly. And I believe today is, Go7 builds his first vehicle, and his first vehicle he chose to build was an artillery. Now it is a strong side artillery. Artillery on your strong side can be pretty good, especially in fog. If you place it in the right positioning, you can lock down a city and stop your opponent from getting it. Go7 at this point is an 1100 level player, so he should know how to use his artillery effectively. For me personally, I still kind of suck at using artillery, so we're going to see how he chooses to use it, and if he's able to lock the opponent out of advancing into an area that he wishes to protect. That's the best way to use an artillery in fog, because your opponent can't see their artillery, so you can't really effectively zone them out because they don't know where to avoid, but you can use it to lock down an area and even catch your opponent by surprise. So artillery play in fog is a little bit different. Now Go7 is just now starting this chain on day 6, whereas Yvonichou is going to be moving to capture the second property in the chain already. At the same time, Go7 has started to push into the center. He actually skipped over this city and he's moving this infantry past here because he wants to get over here and get these properties as soon as possible. This is something that I actually mostly see lower level players do, which makes sense because, he was a lower ranking when this match was recorded. He wasn't even a Penguin yet, he's just a normal Brown Earth commander. So a lot of times I think higher level players will usually just get the nearby cities and build up their economy sooner, whereas lower level players will rush out and try to get these contested properties faster. And a lot of times, if you get these contested properties, they just end up getting flipped. That's why it can be risky to do that, especially in Fog when you don't really have an idea of what's going on. And speaking of not having an idea what's going on, you may have noticed, but neither of these players has even built a single recon yet. So this is really interesting. Right now, I would say the meta has developed such that building recons, people have really understood the importance of building recons in Fog, and even in Standard, you see recons get built just for the sake of interrupting the capture game of your opponent. Whereas back in the past, like maybe a year ago, or maybe even not that long ago, you definitely used to see people who said that building recons wasn't worth it, and you could just rely on tanks for vision, you could just rely on your infantry for vision. And so this match, I think, must have taken place during that time when building recons wasn't really a big part of the meta yet. Because both players are not building any recons, they're just blindly moving into the center and kind of hoping for the best. Now, Yvonichou has done a really good job of starting to build this wall here and capture their strong side, as well as starting a tank chain on their strong side. So I talked about how Go7's strategy was to gain control of the center and focus on good positioning. Yvonichou's strategy is to just push on the strong side and take advantage of the fact that they have this strong side advantage here, and they're just going to make everything of that advantage that they can. Personally, this is my favorite playstyle as well. I usually like to just go all in on my strong side, and in Fog especially, this is important. The reason is because in Fog, you can't see your opponent's build order and you can't see exactly what their troop positioning is, and so making risky plays is a much bigger gamble. It's a much bigger gamble to make your riskier plays. And so Go7 is choosing to push this tank to the center, but he doesn't really know, what this tank is moving into. If the opponent had built maybe, if the opponent took these two tanks up here, his tank would just get completely annihilated in a 2 versus 1 tank battle. Whereas if he builds 2 tanks on his strong side and he pushes this way, there's no way that his opponent is going to be able to defeat him. 1 base against 2 bases, 2 tanks against 1 tank. You're guaranteed to win if you push on your strong side. That's why it's a much safer gamble to push on your strong side in Fog. Another thing you can do to make your play more reliable in Fog is to just be a little bit more slow, a little bit more methodical, build up your units, and wait, and then wait and don't push until you know for sure that you have enough units to back up that push, so that you can wipe out everything that your opponent has and there's no chance of being counterattacked. Although having that kind of patience is a little bit difficult. For myself personally, I tend to get impatient, I rush in, I get punished. So, I don't consider myself an expert. Yvonichou now is really going all in on this tank chain. We have 4 tanks on the strong side now, whereas Go7 only has 2 tanks and an artillery. This artillery hasn't gotten to do anything yet. Now the artillery is going to move in the forest here to lock down this property. I guess the idea, I think Go7's idea was to capture this property as soon as possible because it's contested and it's on the opponent's side. And then, to prevent the opponent from flipping the property back, you could plant this artillery in these woods and you can stop their infantry from changing it back from brown to green. So that was Go7's strategy with running across this mountain at the start of the match and building the artillery as their first build. Everything was to secure this property here. And to be fair, both players have 15,000 income right now, so it's not like he really sacrificed very much for this play. He's basically pretty even with his opponent on the economy game, but he managed to get this contested city, and that might pay off in the long run. He builds the first copter here, so we're seeing our first copter, and now he's coming in, he's also going to get this contested property as well. Although, Yvonichou is in position to interrupt it. Yvonichou moves across the river, and he's securing this capture. I think because because of his infantry movement at the start, he was able to get over into this corner a little bit faster, whereas you can see Go7 still hasn't gotten across this river yet. Now this is going to be a problem, because this tank has vision on this infantry. And as you can see, so the rear tank moves forward to get vision on this forest. This ensures that the second tank is not going to get trapped. The second tank comes in, and shooting with the forest with Lash's firepower boost on an infantry who's in the river with 0 defense, that's a one-shot right there. I don't know if it's guaranteed, it might be a roll, but either way, he was able to instantly wipe out that infantry, and this play was huge. This is going to prevent Go7 from getting the city for an extremely long time. I mean, as soon as he could get it, he would need to go 1 day here, 2 days here, 3 days just to capture this city. So it's going to be at least 3 days before he can capture this. And even that just relies on the fact that this infantry will be able to get into position soon enough when there's already 2 tanks in front of him. So we're moving our tank chain forward. Go7 is moving everything into the center. He's trying to control the center. Yvonichou is moving everything across the strong side and trying to gain control of this lower flank. Now, day 8, he decides to build an anti-air. He doesn't see his opponent's build order, but he's proactively building this anti-air so that when the copter comes, he will be ready. It's a very, very, very smart play on Yvonichou's part. In Fog, you want to have those anti-air ready ahead of time. Now we're covering the rest of our infantry movement. Go7 is going to begin his captures. He's going to move his copter in. Once again, everything that Go7 does is to secure this position in the center. Even his copter is going right into the middle. He's going to use his infantry to get vision because still no recons. He's going to start a copter chain, so he wants to gain air superiority. Now, Go7 finally builds his first recon. It's day 9. We've got our first recon in play. We'll see if this is able to help contribute with vision. It would definitely be better if he already had a recon in the center, but better late than never, I say. So he's regrouping. He's going to pull back because he just wants to wait for he wants to wait for Yvonichou to extend into the middle, and then he'll be able to punish him when he tries to capture these cities. Now it's Yvonichou's turn. He's going to move his infantry in and his tanks in to get vision. Now, he didn't have any vision here. All he could see was this one infantry on this city right here. So he had to move this tank in without any recon support, without any vision. He's just, blindly moving into the center, moving into a brawl. Now that he sees that there's another tank here, he decides to commit to this attack. And so he's going to back it up with his infantry. I guess he figured since he had already moved 1 tank in, he had 2 choices. He could either commit to the attack or he could sacrifice his tank. You don't want to be the very first player who sacrifices a tank in the match, so he decided to go all in and just back up this tank with whatever he had available at the time. The next thing Yvonichou is going to do, he's going to try to secure this capture, and he attacks with this infantry here. It might have been a good idea to move this infantry forward to get vision first, and then he could have used these 2 infantry to actually wipe out this infantry rather than going for the capture. One thing that I learned when I started playing, I used to always go for captures first, and then as I started to get better at the game, one thing that I started to do was if I was in position to attack from a neutral city, I would just attack first and then I would capture later, rather than trying to capture and then letting the opponent attack me. If you disagree with that sentiment, or if you have any more interesting thoughts about that, you can let me know in the comments, because that's just my personal thought based on my experience playing the game, but it might actually be better to go for the capture first rather than the attack first. It'd be interesting to hear what other players have to say about that. So the recon is moving forward. It's still not really giving very much vision, but it's part of the reason is because it's pretty difficult to reinforce from this weak side base, as I mentioned. You have to move pretty far. So this copter is going to come in to get a first strike against this tank. Now on the surface, this seems like a good move, but this goes back to what I was saying earlier about playing in Fog, is that you don't really know what your opponent's going to do. If you ever make a risky play, it's a much bigger gamble. In standard play, you could see that the opponent had this anti-air here waiting to punish you, but in Fog, you don't know what's going to happen. So this copter comes in, and this has happened to me before, where I thought my copter was safe, or I wasn't sure. I was like, well, maybe they don't have an anti-air, I'm just going to go for the strike. You should really never do that in Fog. You should wait, and you should only attack with your copters when you know that it's going to be safe, because getting punished can be devastating. So this copter succeeded in taking out a tank, which was worth 7,000 in value, but it's going to get immediately wiped out by this anti-air, and the copter is worth 9,000 in value. And so this trade, Go7 lost 2,000 gold on this exchange. And he lost a copter, which I think is probably a more useful unit than a tank. So it was a pretty bad trade. And it's not often that I get to criticize the second best player in the world, so I'm going to savor that moment while I can. Now once again, Yvonichou is like moving infantry forward to get captures in the middle of a brawl. But I will say this: I actually like this play better, and the reason is because it puts pressure on the opponent. So right now, Go7 only has 2 units in this area, and this copter is about to get taken out. And so if this property is currently in danger of being flipped, Go7 has to dedicate a unit to interrupting this capture, and he has to dedicate additional units to fighting back against whatever's going on in the center. So that drastically increases the pressure. And there we go, the anti-air comes in, immediately wipes out that copter. This has happened to me before, and whenever this happens, I always feel like I just instantly lost the match. It's a really terrible feeling. And again, the tank comes in, he gets to punish this tank, so not only did he get the copter, but he got a favorable trade against the tank. And now he's putting on a ton of pressure. All 4 of these cities are under threat of being captured. So Go7 invested so heavily on getting the center at the start, and now Yvonichou is already threatening to flip all 4 of these contested properties. And he's punishing more heavily in the center. Second, a backup tank comes in. He had this, this strong tank chain, and Yvonichou was able to take advantage of the verticality of this map. So he went all in on his strong side, where he was guaranteed to win. And then, once he had secured the strong side, all he had to do was just move these units straight up into the center, and he was able to challenge Go7 right in the area where Go7 had overcommitted his resources. So Go7 put everything into the center, and it didn't even pay off. He still got punished because Yvonichou was able to move into the center very easily after he had already gained control of his strong side. Now, to give Go7 some credit, he was also able to maintain control of his own strong side just by using infantry, so he didn't really need tanks or anything like that over here. So you could say both players, their play was pretty effective up to this point, but you can see that Yvonichou is making better trades. He has more unit value, he's going to have more unit count by the end of this turn, and he has better positioning in the center, despite the fact that Go7 put more resources into the center at the start of the match. And that's one of the devastating things about taking these risky gambles in fog play, is that if your opponent punches you, it can really put you behind. And all this pressure in the center is going to probably guarantee that at least one of these captures is going to get secured. So the artillery does its job of holding the city and keeping it safe, so that's pretty good. So right now, Go7 sees that the anti-air has moved up here to punish this copter. So with his second copter, what he's going to do, he's going to take it down here. He's going to take it away from the direction of where the anti-air is, and he's going to use it to interrupt this capture down here. So not only is he using this copter to interrupt a capture, but he's actually he's escaping from the coverage zone of the anti-air, and he's moving into a position that's going to have to draw the anti-air away from his airport. So if he builds more copters, they're going to be able to stream into the center. Now, there's a reason this happened. This is a replay glitch. This recon moved over here, and it got trapped on the forest, and then his tank moved in to back it up and attack this tank here. So this tank comes in to punish that tank, and then Go7, he's basically, his strategy, or his goal this turn is to just interrupt as many of these captures as he can possibly interrupt. He's gonna go over here. He wants to use this infantry to help to just completely wipe out this one. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave this this city under siege because there was a risk of a joint cap maybe later on, and then you'd have to dedicate more resources to protecting the property, or it could even get flipped. You don't want to let one of your own properties get flipped because that's an income swing of 2,000 gold per turn. The reason is because not only is the opponent getting plus 1,000, but you're also losing 1,000. Now here we see Go7's second recon moving into the fray. Now what's funny is that Yvonichou still has not built any recons. So Go7 finally has 2 recons on the field, and Yvonichou has 0 recons on the field at this point in time. Good infantry engagement right here, using these 2 to wipe out the unit on the road. This tank's going to come in, it's going to get a first strike from the city. That's a good favorable trade. And then he pops his hyper repair. Instead of saving for his hyper upgrade, he decided to just pop a hyper repair and just try to get as much value as possible. I think it's because he's been losing units, but he also has a lot of damage units, and so he just wanted to protect as much of their HP as possible. Deal as much damage here, to help prevent this capture, because he wanted to... This city right here, it only has 4 points remaining, so he wanted to get this infantry under 4 health to prevent this capture. It also helped to ensure that this infantry could wipe out this weakened infantry here. So it was a pretty decent hyper repair. We're going to build 3 tanks, so I think Go7 realizes that things have turned into a brawl, and he wants to get fast units into the center right away. This was a really good build. This was probably one of Go7's best builds during this match. He gets 3 tanks, and they can get right into the fight right away. Maybe building another copter would have been good here, because he knows that this anti-air is going to get pulled out of the center, which means his copter can move into the center, which has a copter has a very favorable matchup against these weakened tanks. So it would have been good to get another copter into the center quickly. Now, through that entire push, Yvonichou was able to flip one of these cities, which was a shame because, I mean, they were threatening 4 cities, so you would think that they would have been able to get a little bit more. He does go for the join cap here, so not only has this property been reduced to 2 value, but now there's a full health infantry sitting on top of it. So now Go7 is going to have to dedicate even more resources to preventing this capture. Now this move I thought was a little bit weird. This tank is like going over here to the sides. I guess it's because of what I mentioned earlier, where if you ignore these corners, they can get flipped pretty easily. And you do see that there actually are, Yvonichou doesn't have vision on it, but there's actually 3 infantry over here waiting to move in and flip these cities. So the fact that this tank went over here proactively ended up being really good, although it's very strange. It looks like a weird move, but it actually ended up working out in the end. So maybe I'm the one who's in the wrong here. Maybe that actually is the correct move. For me, personally, what I would have done is just get all my tanks together and just, keep streaming forces into the center. He's going to commit to this capture as well. So you can see Yvonichou has a lot of injured units capturing cities, and whenever he's in that position, he actually doubles down and just commits to trying to secure those captures. Sometimes this can be a bad thing because you're just throwing away infantry that are going to get killed, but at other times it can be a good thing because it forces your opponent to respond, it forces them to waste one of their actions to interrupt that capture. Again, this city now, this is down to 4 and he has a 6 health infantry on it, so this has to be interrupted, otherwise Yvonichou will flip this city. So he's still threatening this city, and this city, and he's already flipped this one. So this push has not really been repelled yet. It's still very much in play. This tank comes in right here to finish off this weakened unit. Now the anti-air is moving down here. This anti-air is moving down to chase this copter, just like we mentioned. So this pulls the anti-air out of the center. It would have been great if Go7 had a copter ready to move in and capitalize on that. But he does still make a pretty good maneuver, which we're going to see shortly here. This was a great attack. He got a free shot from the silo here. He doesn't have very many tanks left in the center, but his other tanks are going to be catching up to the center pretty soon. And so the one full health tank that he has, he's making pretty good use of it. This one right here has a chance to come in and finish off this weakened tank because Yvonichou overextended, and then he gets a good roll right here. This infantry is able to finish off the weakened tank. You really love when that happens. And then this tank's going to come in here to interrupt this capture. Now this is a little bit scary because remember that Lash gets bonus attack power when she's on cities, and not only is her power ready, but her superpower is going to be ready very soon. So if Yvonichou can trigger that superpower and attack with a tank from a city onto a shoal, I mean, that's going to deal a lot of damage. So that was a pretty reckless maneuver from Go7. But he's able to interrupt this cap, he's able to interrupt this cap, he gets a nice first strike from the city, and he gets vision on this artillery, so now he knows the artillery is here. He's moving his other tanks into the center. These are going to be ready to enter the fight very soon. Now this was the play that I really liked with this copter. What he did was he moved his copter over here and attacked the infantry a second time to finish interrupting this capture from the right hand side. Additionally, because he saw last turn, because he had vision on the anti-air, he saw that the anti-air moved down here to chase him, but with the mountain here and the river here, there's actually no way for this anti-air to ever hit this copter. So that was a really great play, where not only did he interrupt the capture, but he was able to completely prevent any chance of being punished by the anti-air. He's going to build anti-air of his own. That way, if any copters... I think he built his anti-air in response to this copter. So one thing I will say about Go7's play in this match is that he was very slow with building his anti-air. Typically, a copter appears in the center, and then Go7 builds an anti-air a turn later, whereas Yvonichou built his anti-air ahead of time, and when the copters appeared, he was already there to punish them. As a result, this copter is going to be able to generate a lot more value before Go7 is able to deal with it. Now we're getting back up on this mountain for vision. and moving our infantry over here. I think he wanted to get vision on this city to see what was going on, but Yvonichou was pretty smart. He left his infantry here so that this property right here was not going to get flipped. This tank comes in and gets a nice first strike against this tank, and we pass back to Yvonichou's turn. So we're going to move into the forest here and get vision. I think he was just checking just to see if there's anything in this forest. He's going to take a shot with this artillery here, and then I believe he's going to start building a wall around his infantry. Now he does get the first strike from the city, but he doesn't get a superpower strike. If he had the superpower, I think this would have been a one-shot. Instead, he just manages to heavily damage the tank, which is still extremely good. Now, because this anti-air had nothing else to do, he decides to go up here and use it to wipe out an infantry. I disagree with this move. I think what he should have done is moved into the forest here, and then he could have just waited and then got a first strike against another copter. But this does open up the way for this tank to come in and get a first strike against this other infantry, which is, I also kind of disagree with that. He actually already has vision over here. 1, 2, 3. He can see that this full health tank is right here, and yet he's still moving his tank in to get first strike against an infantry when he knows that he's going to get first strike against him by a tank. Pretty reckless play. So you're getting a nice shot from a city here. Once again, this is the same thing that we saw over here where the tank got the shot from this forest into this river. This tank over here gets a shot from this city onto this shoal, and he could just, with Lash, you can just one-shot the opponent infantry when you have the correct positioning. And that's one of the very, very strong advantages that Lash has against a CO, like a neutral CO like Andy with no day-to-day powers. And just a lot of COs in general don't really have defensive boosts. So you can get those one-shots on infantry. That helps you maintain unit count, and it really helps you slow down your opponent's capture game. And those infantry can also be useful for building walls, and so you can use it, they won't be able to build walls later on in the match, or you can use it to break through walls. There's a lot of things you can do with Lash's boosted firepower. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to having the perfect positioning. And like I said before, you're not always going to have the perfect positioning, so you can't really rely on that. Now, I want to come back to something really, really amusing. Remember on I think it was day 6, I said that it was going to take a while for Go7 to get this property. I said it could take maybe around 3 days. Yeah, it's day 13, and Go7 is just now starting to capture this property, so he's not going to get this property until day 14. So that play early on where this tank stopped his infantry here from getting the city, that was huge. That prevented Go7 from probably getting around 7,000 income. Just in the fact that the tank was able to interrupt this infantry here, this tank generated at least 7,000 gold worth of value, in addition to the infantry that it wiped out. So that was an extremely strong play early on in the match. Now Go7 is going for the hyper repair again. I noticed he uses the hyper repair multiple times during this match. This is the second time he's already used it. Now here, because Yvonichou overextended with the anti-air, the tank is able to come in and get a clean first strike on it. Really punishing maneuver. Next thing, we're moving this out of the way. We're going to use the tank from further back to get a first strike here. Now this frees up this tank here so that he can do whatever he wants with it. The injured tank is going to come in to finish off this anti-air. The reason he was able to finish off this anti-air with the injured tank was because of that hyper repair. So this was another really well-timed, really good hyper repair. You can tell that Go7 really understands how to play Andy effectively, because most players are going to save for the hyper upgrade and they're just going to use the hyper upgrade. But in this case, having a 4 HP tank was just enough to wipe out this anti-air and completely remove it from the map. And so that hyper repair was kind of worth it just for that alone. Now, even though he freed up the action on this tank, I believe he actually leaves this tank sitting here this turn, which we're going to see in a moment. Yeah, he pulls back with the artillery and he moves the recon into the forest to maintain vision over the center. And then at the end, he does decide to just leave this tank sitting here. The reason he left it sitting here and he didn't go for first strike on this tank on the city, was because on the following turn, Lash was going to use her superpower, and then she would be able to attack from this city onto his tank. And so that's why he's positioning his units here, around the shoals and the plains, so that if Yvonichou uses his power, Lash is not going to get as much value out of it. Whereas if he was moving his tanks onto these shoals, moving them next to city tiles, he was just begging to get punished. And indeed, Yvonichou uses Prime Tactics. We're going to get a shot here. Now this Prime Tactics, I think this is a case where some players do this, where they just use their superpower right away as soon as they get it without really thinking about how much value it's going to generate, because Yvonichou really does not get much value out of this power. So this tank attacking from a plains tile gets plus 10 extra firepower. This infantry doesn't get any boosts. This infantry does get a nice shot here, so it was able to wipe out this opposing infantry in one shot because of the prime tactics. So that was a pretty good shot right there. This copter does not get any boost. This tank gets a plus 10% attack bonus, and this tank gets plus 10% attack bonus. In addition to, you know, whatever they would normally get. So the amount of bonus that he got from that prime tactics was around 30 attack. He got around plus 30 attack. And then finished off a few weakened units. Meanwhile, I think because he used his superpower, he felt like he needed to push, but as a result, he's really overextended. You can see, I mean, he's got two injured tanks, and then 2 artillery that don't have any protection. There's no wall protecting his infantry, and he's running right into, you know, 4 tanks and a copter. He just overextended. He's just asking to be punished with that push, and the only reason he did it was because he felt obligated to do it, because he used his superpower, which he shouldn't have even done. And what's even worse is that he moved this tank into range of this artillery. I think he might have thought that the artillery was still in this forest, so he thought moving next to the forest he'd be safe, and so Go7's move where he pulled back the artillery on the previous turn ended up being really good. So as expected, these tanks are going to come in and they're going to heavily punish here. However, Go7 is really leaving himself in position to get shelled by this artillery. This medium tank is going to come out. It's going to take a while for this medium tank to get into the battle, although because of the verticality of this map, it actually kind of isn't too bad, because it takes a tank around 2 turns to get to this position, and it takes a medium tank around 2 turns to get to this position. So if you're reinforcing units in the center from this base right here, a medium tank is almost as good as a regular tank, although there are situations where it's not going to be quite as good, and we will see that later. Nice first strike from this copter against the opposing copter, and he's going to use the recon to interrupt this capture. However, this was one of the things where the prime tactics really paid off. The defensive stars, he has 60% extra defense on this city. Recon against an infantry, and it only did 2 damage. And then the infantry was able to do a pretty decent amount of damage back just because it also had boosted firepower. So now Go7 is maintaining, he's regaining control of the center. Nice shot from this artillery. Remember, this has 20% boosted firepower, attacking a recon on the road. He was able to take it out with 1 shot because it was already injured by that infantry earlier. Now Go7 has no vision. So Yvonichou hasn't been building recons, but Go7 has only built those 2 recons earlier, and now they've both been wiped out. So both players are back in the same position as before. They don't have much vision, and they're just kind of blindly fighting into the center. Another good shot from a city, plus 30% firepower against a full health tank. This copter is going to go here to get some more chip damage on this tank. The infantry is going to come in to finish off the weakened copter. Tank's going to come in to finish off the weakened tank. We're moving in a second artillery to back up the other artillery. This infantry is going to finish off this weakened tank. And then this tank's going to come up here to get a first strike against this one. So, you know, even though Yvonichou's positioning was not that great last turn, and it seemed like he was going to get punished, it's kind of funny how fast he turned it around. Now, these artillery they don't really have any support. There's nothing in front of them. There's nothing walling them or protecting them. And yet at the same time, just because they're covering each other, they were able to rain down attacks on these tanks. And along with the copter support and making really good use of the infantry, Yvonichou was able to wipe out a lot of the tanks here in the center and regain, you know, control of this solid positioning. It's actually pretty amazing how many times this control of the center just keeps flipping back and forth, where it seems like Go7 has the center, and then Yvonichou has the center. And then it seems like Go7 has the center again. It's like they just keep going back and forth here in the center. Now he's moving in this tank just to kind of help wall these artillery a little bit better. He's building more anti-air proactively, because he doesn't have any anti-air on the field, and he knows that more copters are coming in. You can see he doesn't have vision on any copters right now, but he's already built an anti-air because he knows that more copters are coming. That's different from how, like I mentioned earlier, Go7 typically only built anti-air after he'd already seen a copter. So this medium tank is going to come in, and it's going to hit this tank with a 1-shot. That's really good because this opens up space to punish this artillery. This tank's going to come in to get a first strike against this tank. This tank's going to come in here to weaken this artillery. The weakened tank can finish off the weakened infantry, and then you're going to get a good first strike against this infantry here. So the counter push wasn't too bad, but he still left himself within range of being shelled by both of these artillery. So I don't know, it was still a little bit of a reckless play. And then once again, Go7 is using the hyper repair. This time I didn't really understand what the purpose of the hyper repair was. Okay, it was for this tank here. So this 6 health tank was able to wipe out this 4 health tank. If this tank still only had 4 HP, he would not have been able to wipe out this tank. So I guess he used the hyper repair for that reason. And then that also opens up space for this infantry to come in here and finish off this infantry. So I guess that helped. Now, one really funny thing I noticed was that Go7 built this mech. I said this earlier, it's not often I get to, criticize one of the best players in the world, but I completely disagree with building this mech. It's going to take so long for this mech to get into the fight. It's going to take him, like, I don't know, 2 weeks before he gets his first paycheck. There's no way this mech's going to get into the center fast enough to help out. Go7 really needs to just be spamming tanks right now. He builds an anti-air, but once again, it's because he already sees these copters here. So he's building an anti-air in response to these copters, and also because he knows that this anti-air is going to get taken out next turn. But because it's going to take a while for this anti-air to get over here, these copters are going to have plenty of time to, generate tons of value in the center. Now, Yvonichou's strategy, which was interesting to me, is that he actually sent the tank over here, and he sent a tank over here, and so he's using these tanks on the corners to help maintain control of the corners. I mentioned before that if you ignore the corners, the opponent can flip them, and so I guess his goal was to prevent that from happening. He wanted to maintain control of his properties here, and he also wanted to potentially, you can see he's threatening to flip these properties here, and he's going to help defend these properties here, and because he has these tanks, and Go7 doesn't really have anything in these corners, he can very easily maintain control of the corners. Meanwhile, his artillery in the center are just completely shelling. It's allowing infantry to come in and wipe out weakened anti-air. This tank is going to get a good first strike here. We're damaging the medium tank. The copter is going to help chip down this tank. Another great shot against a tank here. Like I mentioned before, these copters are perfect counters to the tanks. And there's no anti-air, he just wiped out the anti-air. The backup anti-air support is all the way back here, so this copter is already generated, 3,500 value. And then his anti-air is coming in here, so by the time that this copter gets into the battle, this anti-air is already going to be ready. Meanwhile, on the other side, by the time this copter gets into the center, these copters here have already generated a ton of value. Now that we're regaining control of the center, we're going to build it's almost like a connection between these tanks. So this tank right here is 6 spaces away from this tank. This tank here is 6 spaces away from this tank. This tank is within range of this tank. So basically what's happening is that all these tanks here are covering each other, although they are spread out a little bit, and it's going to take this tank a while to get into position. So even though Go7 just kind of got really pummeled with artillery fire, he still has a strong force in the center, and he's still going to be able to commit to his strategy of maintaining control of the center. These copters are moving in now. They were able to finish off the weakened copter, but now they've already exposed their positioning, and so now Yvonichou knows where Go7's copters are, although he's not going to have vision on them on the following turn, so he has to gain vision on them, and he has to get his anti-air into a position where he can get the first strike. So these copters, they're doing pretty good work right now. Yvonichou was ready with the counter, but Go7 was able to make some good plays so that these copters could still safely enter the battle without getting immediately punished this time. Because this anti-air is surrounded, it's just going to take a shot on this tank. You might as well do that. I mean, if you're stuck and you're going to die anyway. This tank's going to come in here to finish off the weakened tank. This artillery is moving back here so that these tanks can come in. Now, the reason for this move right here, you have a tank here that can reach this medium tank and a tank here that can reach this medium tank. The reason why you want to use the one that's further away is because you come in and you strike here, and now this tank, which is closer to the battle, is free to move in, and this tank can reach anywhere all the way out through here, whereas if you use this tank to finish off the medium tank, this tank that's back here would be out of position, and it wouldn't be able to reach anything, it wouldn't be able to contribute to the fight. So when you're in a position where you have 2 units that can both strike, you want to use the one that's further away first, and then use the closer unit to move. And then you're also, a lot of times you're going to have better vision after the first unit moves. And so that's going to allow you to generate even more value from this unit. He reveals the position of his anti-air in order to finish off a weakened tank. Not a great move, but he does have an infantry there to wall it, and it's not going to be possible to break through this infantry. And so this anti-air is going to be pretty safe on the following turn, I believe. Now this was a very strange prime tactics. I didn't really understand this one. He gets to fire from a shoal, from a plane onto a shoal against an infantry, and he gets to fire from a forest onto a mountain with a tank. But at this point, Yvonichou's turn is already over, and so I guess the only reason he used the prime tactics was to give himself a slight boost to defense. But a lot of his units are not even really on good defensive terrain like this. This is 0 defensive stars. This is 20 defense right here. This is 40 defense right here. These two tanks right here are the only units that are really getting value out of the boosted defense. And I guess this infantry, but you couldn't break through this. You couldn't break through this infantry anyway, so it doesn't really matter in this case. So I thought that was a very strange prime tactics. I think it was another case where he just used it because he had it. So Go7 is going to reposition his forces, and he's going to try to recapture this property here. He's building a nice solid wall. He's not going to push into the prime tactics because he doesn't want to go against that boosted defense. Instead, he's just going to get his units into position, and then he's getting this anti-air ready so that he can get a first strike against his copter. So that was a really good repositioning. Now our buddy over here, our favorite mech, yeah, he hasn't even reached the point where he can join this defensive line, so he still hasn't really generated any value. Now, I want to talk about this play right here. Let me go back really quick. I talked before about how the medium tanks are pretty good on this map, but they're still not as good as regular tanks, and you're going to see the reason right here. It's because this medium tank is not able to reach this tank here. So if Go7 had been building recons like he should have been building, and if he had been building tanks like he should have been building, he would have vision. Let's say that instead of this mech, let's say he built a recon. So this recon would be over here now, and he would have vision on this tank. Let's say instead of this medium tank, he built a tank. A regular tank could reach here, and it could get a first strike against this tank, where the medium tank was not able to do that. So Go7's strategy this entire match has been to maintain positioning and get control of the center, but he's building slow units like medium tanks and mechs that can't get into the center fast enough to actually enact the plan that he wants to carry out. So there was definitely some flaws in his build order. That's probably the one takeaway that I would get from this match. And then he moves in with his copter to get first strike on this copter, and then he moves in here to get a first strike against this tank. Now again, even if he hadn't built the recon, after this move, this weakened tank, he could have brought in his own tank and he could have just finished off this weakened tank. But the medium tank just couldn't reach, and so there's nothing he can do about it. So Yvonichou is just going to push back, and he has a lot of tanks already in the center. He gets a first strike with it, so he, just like last turn, he had moved his anti-air into this position so that he could get a first strike, and he successfully managed to take out that copter, which really helps a lot with breaking through this wall. You're going to finish off this weakened artillery. Now Go7 only has 2 weakened tanks in the center, and now I don't know how this happened. I felt like Go7 had, Go7 had started to rebuild his defensive line. He was playing passive, he was playing cautious. It seemed like he was going to take his time, reposition, and get into a better spot. And then somehow Yvonichou, all these tanks that had been spread out to the sides, all moved into the center all at once, and then just out of nowhere, he completely takes control of the center. I mean, he's got 4 tanks that are basically on full health. They're backed up by artillery. You've got copters coming in. You've got anti-air coming in. So even if Go7 has, even if Go7 had copters to come in and punish these tanks, we already have anti-air ready to punish the copters. And then we've got additional tanks moving in on the sides. So instead of building slow medium tanks, we've got tanks that are going to be moving into the center faster. This tank is going to be able to reach further. This medium tank can only get to about here, whereas this tank can get all the way over here if it needs to on the following turn. So these faster units, these faster tanks, are going to allow Yvonichou to do a much better job of maintaining control of the center. Now finally, this mech gets to come in, and it gets a nice shot against that 6 health tank. Can't really disagree with that. It did eventually generate value, but just keep in mind how long it took for this mech to get over here, and the only thing it did was wipe out one injured tank when it was basically already too late. Like, this was too little too late. So we're trying to push back against this wall, and we can't even break through a single one of these tanks. And then we're taking shots from an anti-air against a tank on a city. I think maybe that was just a move of desperation. And then this Neo tank is coming over here to interrupt a capture. He should have... I don't know what he should have done, honestly. At this point, there wasn't much he could do. But he uses his superpower at this point. I guess it was to give extra movement to the medium tank. No, the medium tank could already reach this, so I don't know. I guess he was just feeling desperate, and he used the superpower for that reason, but there was just no way for him to break through this wall. And I thought he was going to resign here, but he keeps pushing. And then, strangely enough, he base skips on 2 different bases. Then he builds another medium tank, which is going to take forever to get into the center. So Go7 is in a really bad position here, and he's not making the moves that he needs to make in order to get back into this fight. So his medium tank that took forever to get here is just immediately getting shelled by artillery. This copter's coming in, it's going to get a clean strike against this copter. He didn't even succeed at wiping out the anti-air. It's going to be back up to 3 health next turn, which is honestly good enough to deal with a 4 health copter. He's getting a first strike against the anti-air. He's finishing off these infantry so that Go7 doesn't have the units that he needs to build a wall. In Fog, you can't see the statistics of your opponent. You can only see your own stats. But I think at this point, Go7 probably realized, hey, I only have 13 units. I only have 65,000 value. I'm in a really, really bad position. And Yvonichou is just building up a mass of units in the center, and Go7 has almost nothing left to fight back against it. And as a result, you will immediately see the King of the Penguins has resigned. Yes, Go7 actually lost. Keep in mind, this was a long time ago. He was an 1100 level player, and he made a couple of mistakes that ended up really punishing him in the long run. So I do want to talk about their overall strategy and the mistakes that they made really quickly. So Go7, from the very beginning of the match, you saw that he wanted to control the center, but throughout the match, he failed to build the units that he needed to control the center. He was lacking in vision, he was lacking in anti-air support. He started building slow units like medium tanks that couldn't get into the center fast enough, building mechs that couldn't get into the center fast enough. If he had good vision and he had just been streaming tanks into the center, maybe he could have succeeded at controlling the center, but he wasn't able to do it, even though that's what he wanted to do. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Yvonichou, his early strategy was to capture his strong side. In Fog, this is a guaranteed plan of success, and so after he captured his strong side, he was able to use the verticality of this map really greatly to his advantage and just reinforce straight up through the middle. He had control of his strong side, and he just reinforced right into the middle, and there was nothing Go7 could do to fight back against it. Additionally, Yvonichou was able to watch over the flanks for the entire match. He only had to dedicate 1 tank to each corner, but that was able to help him maintain control of the corners, and it even helped him flip this property. He was able to, he definitely went all in on trying to flip properties, but as a result, he got these 2 in the center here as well. So I do think Yvonichou was probably a little bit too enthusiastic in trying to go for contested properties, but in the end, his play was better overall, and you can see that even with Lash's 43% win rate versus Andy's 53% win rate, the better play, positioning, and tactics, and the better unit builds of Yvonichou was able to secure the victory in the end, although I will say both players were lacking in recons. I don't know if Yvonichou built a single recon in the entire match. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. That will let me know that you want to see more Advance Wars by Web content in the future. I do post a variety of different content, and so the only way I'm going to know that people want to see more Advance Wars is if you like this video. You could also leave comments, but as long as people enjoy these videos, I am going to keep making them. Otherwise, I'll probably just make more Advance Wars videos whenever I feel like it. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.